Hey everyone, welcome back to Blurred Lines, Crime, Conspiracy, and the Truth Behind the Gossip. Welcome to our Friday episode where we do a deep dive into a case that has intrigued me and also blurred the lines between conspiracy theory and murder. Before we get this episode started, I just want to go over a couple of things here with you guys. Again, I do apologize if you guys hear a lot of background noise. One, I have animals, and two, my animals are in a fish tank and I have not filled that fish tank up. So bear with me with any kind of background noise. Again, I am using what I have to film this. If you guys ever want to donate to the podcast, as I am not doing any kind of ads or anything like that right now, I do have a link in the podcast notes or in the description of the podcast that you guys can donate to, and I appreciate each and every one of you guys for it. Also, just as a reminder, I am still looking for somebody that can do music for me. You will be credited. Unfortunately, I cannot pay you for it right now, but you will be credited for it. And as I grow bigger on the podcast, we can start talking about kind of pay and stuff like that. Right now, I'm just looking for a basic melody to start and end episodes with. Later on, I will want stuff in between and things like that. But right now, that's all I'm asking. So if you or you know somebody that does do that, let me know. Send me an email, ashtootrippy@gmail.com. You can also email me at ashtootrippy@gmail.com as well to give me any kind of case suggestions, or if you want me to talk about something, I'll look over it and see if it fits the narrative of Blurred Lines. Today, I want to get into this. So last week, I had turned on the TV because, sometimes we want to watch something, and everything that I've been watching has been episodes. So I haven't been able to really watch everything, and I'm like, okay, well, what do I watch now? Well, I came across this documentary. It was called Keeper of the Ashes, the Oklahoma Girl Scout Murders. It's available on Disney Plus and Hulu. And I was like, I've never heard of this. I probably have. I hadn't. Well, so let me put it this way, is I did hear about it because I heard podcasts. I listened to tons of podcasts, including Crime Junkie. And I went back to listen to Crime Junkie's podcast on this, and I'm going to actually link that episode down below. And I will also let you guys know what this series is called and where you can find it, because I can't link that kind of stuff in the show notes down below. But you can find it on Disney Plus and Hulu. Again, it's called Keeper of the Ashes. It's where an award-winning actress and singer, I don't know if you guys have heard of her, Kristen Chenoweth, she returns to her hometown to investigate Oklahoma's most infamous murders. Keeper of the Ashes is the true story of 3 young Oklahoma girls found murdered after their first night at sleepaway camp. So that's what we're going to be covering today. The tragedy, as well as the manhunt and trial and their suspect killer, captivated the nation in the summer of 1977. But decades later, uncertainties surrounding the case continue to haunt the Tulsa community, local law enforcement, and the victims' families. So this documentary was done in 2022, and so I watched it. It looks like a 4-part series, and it's very intriguing. So the actor Kristen Chenoweth, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. She actually was, during the summer of 1977, she was supposed to attend this sleepaway camp, which was to be held in June for the summertime. And the girls, basically, it's a Girl Scout summer camp. It took place in June of 1977. There were around 140 girls that attended a 14-day summer camp that was planned with activities like hiking, swimming, arts and crafts, camping skills, and it just seemed like so much fun. This was for school-age children. It seemed like the youngest kids that were there were around 7 or 8. The oldest kids that were there, it seemed to be in teens. There was different campsites, so the camp was organized into 4 different campsites, and it seemed like those 4 different campsites had a couple of tents, and they all had a camp counselor that would watch them or actually be there if they needed any kind of assistance or anything like that. So it was a camp that girls were going to basically just have a good time and make friends and just have fun during the summer. Any young girl would be excited and also nervous, because a lot of the girls, especially the 3 young girls we're going to talk about today, they were also very nervous. This was the first time they were away from their parents, but they were excited to meet new friends, be in the woods, go camping, do all the fun activities. It seemed like it was an excitement for these little girls, right? I want to start off by just kind of going over who exactly these little girls were. So we're going to start there, and then we'll kind of get into a little bit more of what took place prior to the unaliving of these children. So I want to warn you guys, this is going to have a lot to do with sensitivity to things happening, murders of children, some disturbing things sexually, and all of that stuff. So just be warned, this will contain all of that, okay? So again, this was supposed to be 2 weeks of fun for 100 Girl Scout girls, around 140, and this took place at Camp Scott. It's near Locust Grove, Oklahoma. They arrived on the campsite on June 12th, 1977. Nobody really knew, except it's really weird. So these are the three girls. Lori Farmer was the youngest. She was 8. Michelle Gus was 9, and Denise Milnar was 10. They went into this camp thinking they were gonna have fun. The only one, Denise Milnar, was the one that was kind of iffy about going and being at camp because she hadn't been away from her mom. She was kind of more or less a homebody. She liked being at home with her parents and her siblings. It was something that she wanted to do. She had told her mom about a month prior that this was what she wanted to do. Her mother went ahead, saved up the money, paid for the camp, and was like, okay, let's go. The morning she was supposed to be taken to the buses, she kind of changed her mind. She was like, I don't feel like going, Mom. Like, I'm not into this. And her mom kind of said, let's just try to do this. And if you stay one night and you want to come back home, that's fine. I'll go and pick you up and everything will be fine. So she was the only one out of these three girls that was kind of like, she was the oldest too. She's like, I don't know if I even want to be here. I don't know if I even want to be doing this, come to find out. You know what I mean? So that was something that was very telling. And I feel like it was kind of an intuition thing on Denise's part, and she kind of had a feeling. Now, with this that took place, they were not even in camp for the whole night before this brutal attack took place. I don't want to get into it right away, but I do have to say that these girls, they really had no idea what was about to be coming. Other than what Denise was feeling of wanting to be at home, they really didn't know this. And that's what makes it even sadder to think about. Now, I also want to tell you guys that Denise, she also, when she got to the camp, was still extremely nervous. So when she got to the camp, she also was still very nervous. So the camp counselor kind of took her hand and tried to calm her down and showed her where she was going to be at. Now, where the girls were actually at, they were in, so the way that this was set up was kind of in like a circle, but far away from everything. So they were in camps in tent number 7. Now, a lot of people, if you go online and look at this, a lot of people say it was tent number 8. However, they did not count the camp counselors' tents, so this was number 7. Okay. Now, these murders took place on June 13th of 1977. Like I said, they arrived on June 12th. This was in Mays County in Oklahoma. The victims were 3 Girl Scouts, like I stated. They were raped and murdered. Yes, their bodies were left on a trail leading to the campsite's showers about 150 yards from their tent. The case was classified as solved when Jean Leroy Hart, a local jail escapee with a history of violence and rape, was arrested. However, Hart was acquitted in March of 1979 after a jury unanimously returned a verdict of not guilty. So they do have a suspect in this case, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Less than 2 months before the murders, during an on-site training session, a counselor at Camp Scott discovered that her belongings had been ransacked and her donuts had been stolen. Inside the empty donut box was a handwritten note stating in capital letters, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in tent 1. The director of that camp session treated the note as a prank and it was discarded. So this was 2 months prior to the murders, where they were training all the camp counselors and they noticed that people had had things stolen, and this has happened before this. And isn't that really maniacal to think that there was that handwritten note saying, we're on a mission to kill 3 girls in tent 1. Now, I want to preface this by saying that tent number 7 could have been mistaken as tent 1, but that's also not where this note was left. It was left in one of the camp counselors' tents. So they could have also thought that that tent or one of those tents was tent 1. So around 7 p.m. on Sunday, June 12th, 1977, the night before camp started, the girls huddled in their tents. Among them were the victims, Lori Lee Farmer, who was 8, Doris Denise Milner, who was 10, and Michelle Heather Gus, who was 9. The girls were all residents of Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, a suburb of Tulsa. They were sharing tent number 7 in the camp's Kiowa unit, which was located the farthest from the camp counselor's tent and partially obstructed by the camp showers. Like I said, all of these tents were kind of spread out, but in a circle. So if you guys have ever been to like camps or have seen a campsite, it was a lot like that, but they were far out from each other. And the tent that they were actually in was a tent that was obscured not only by the camp showers, but was a little bit farther down the lane. Now, the fact that they put the youngest kids in this tent kind of boggles my mind, but at the same time, I don't feel like they knew something this sinister would happen. How could they? At around 6 a.m. on June 13th, a camp counselor on her way to the shower saw a girl's body in her sleeping bag in the wooded area just outside the tent area. It was discovered that all 3 girls from tent number 7 were missing. As counselors began searching, they discovered the girls from tent number 7 had been murdered. 2 bodies were inside a sleeping bag, crumpled towards the bottom of the bag. So kind of like if somebody put them in there and they were lifeless, they were just kind of crumpled to the bottom. They probably drug or slung it over their shoulder. The one body was visible on the outside. They had been left on a trail leading to the showers about 150 yards from their tent. Subsequent testing showed that they had been bludgeoned and strangled. All 3 girls had been raped. So they did show that all 3 girls, since they were so young, they determined they were. What ended up happening, because the way that these, I will leave some pictures in the show notes or some resources in the show notes for you. The way these tents are, they're not like these big tents you guys may think that you see like in reality shows that have camps. They're small tents. They're like a pitch tent. You open them up. There's like beds on either side and you walk in and you just like close the tent. There's no like door or anything. It is essentially a tent. So essentially what they think happened is whoever walked in bludgeoned the 2 girls that were, in front, because beds were like in front. And then the 3rd girl, who happened to be Doris Denise Milner, was the one that her body was visible. And to my understanding, she was actually outside a sleeping bag and she was visible, and she did have a strangulation device around her neck, and it seemed like that's the area she was killed in. So she was not killed in the tent. She was killed after the first 2 girls were killed. A large red flashlight was found on top of the girls' bodies. A smudged fingerprint was found on the lens, but it's never been identified as it was too smudged for a positive identification. A footprint from a 9.5 size shoe was also found in the blood in the tent. Between 2:30 and 3 a.m. on June 13th, a landowner reported hearing quite a bit of traffic on a remote road near the camp. When the camp counselor discovered this, they actually did go ahead and shut down the camp. What had happened that morning they found the kids is they gathered them all in what I assume was like the eating hall, and they called the buses and they came for the kids. I'm assuming at this point they called the parents. From what I understand is the parents of the victims were told separately, but by the time they were told, they already knew something had happened at the camp, and a lot of them were already on their way there. So it was very fast. They acted very quickly. A lot of the people that were in the camp, a lot of the other girls that were there, didn't know what was going on until they returned back home. But they all got them on all buses, got them out of there before they started doing any kind of investigation work and all of that stuff. Now let's get into the suspect a little bit more. Gene Leroy Hart. He was born November of 1943. He was at large since 1973 after escaping from the Myers County Jail. He'd been convicted of kidnapping and raping 2 pregnant women, as well as 4 counts of first-degree burglary. He was raised about a mile from Camp Scott. He was a member of the Cherokee Nation, and he was arrested within a year at the home of a Cherokee medicine man. He was represented by Gavin A. Isaacs, a local Oklahoma attorney. He was tried on March 1979, although the local sheriff pronounced himself 1,000% certain that Hart was guilty. A local jury acquitted him as a convicted rapist and jail escapee. Hart still had 305 years of his 308-year sentence left to serve in the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. On June 4th, 1979, 2 years after the murders, Hart collapsed and died of a heart attack at the age of 35 after about an hour of lifting weights and jogging in the prison exercise yard. What a way to go, right? So I wanna touch on this. This was a man that had escaped in 1973 from the county jail because he was convicted of kidnapping and raping 2 pregnant women, as well as burglarizing them. So he broke in somewhere, raped women. Now here is where it gets a little bit interesting. So let me let you guys know. So around where the girls' bodies were found, there was also other stuff that was found. There was like a pair of glasses. There was just random stuff scattered about. None of the stuff that was scattered was the girls that were killed. The glasses were actually the camp counselors' glasses that found the girls. This is a weird tidbit here. Okay, so prior to this, remember when I had said a couple months when the counselors were actually training at the facility, they had somebody ransack tents? Well, when that person ransacked the tents, they also took a number of glasses and they would just throw them places. It seemed like the person was trying them on and then discarding them because they didn't work for them, right? Well, come to find out that Jean Leroy Hart, actually prescription glasses were found when he had burglarized one of these women. Supposedly, this was kind of like his kink. He liked to wear their glasses, or he liked to, I don't know if it was their glasses or if he just couldn't see and he thought that wearing the glasses made him see better. But this is something linking both of these crimes, the crime he committed, why he was in jail in the first place, and the crime that happened with these little girls. You have to remember he was on the run, and he was actually staying in the home of a Cherokee medicine man. And if you guys don't know what a medicine man is kind of like a holistic healer in the Native American culture. A lot of people don't believe in going to doctors with PhDs or even therapists. They will go to a medicine man to help them with any kind of ailments, physical, mental, anything like that. And so this medicine man was actually keeping him safe in a way. Now, where he was found was in the middle of pretty much the wilderness in this medicine man's cabin, or I don't know if it was his or Hart's cabin, but that's where he was found. They ended up going and getting him and all of this stuff. Now, I also want to preface this by saying that this man was Native American. He was a member of the Cherokee Nation. A lot of people in Oklahoma at the time really did think that this was a crime that they were just pointing the finger at whatever Native American guy they could. That was not a thing. The reason they pointed the finger at Gene Hart was because of his prior charges. One, because all of these little girls were raped. The glasses, the burglary, the sneaking around, the kidnapping. All of that stuff is what happened at this campsite. The girls were raped. They were taken from where they should have been, hence kidnapping. The glasses that were found was similar. He obviously, if this was him that also did what they did to the camp counselors 2 months previously, he had burglarized numerous times. So these are all connecting the dots into creating a more sinister pattern, in my opinion, of course. So 2 families later sued Magic Empire Council and its insurer for $5 million equivalent to $14.6 million in 2024, for alleged negligence. The civil trial included discussions of the threatening note and the fact that tent number 7 was 86 yards from the counselor's tent. In 1985, by a 9-3 vote, jurors decided in favor of Magic Empire. So basically, two of the families took the people that were running the campsite and the summer camp to court, and unfortunately they did not win that, because I don't feel like there was really negligence. I just feel like they couldn't have predicted what had happened. To my understanding, this camp was open for years, and the layout was like that for years. You can't really say like this was something that, yes, it was a bad decision, I feel like, to put younger girls farther away from everyone else, but at the same time, it's like they couldn't have anticipated that somebody was gonna go this far in doing this. You know what I mean? It just astounds me. Now, I kind of want to go back here to the fact that Gene Hart died of a heart attack at the age of 35. Kind of says a lot. I think he was trying to do it because he was lifting weights and jogging in the prison exercise yard for about an hour, and honestly, he reaped what he sowed. Honestly, right? Yeah. So DNA testing performed in 1989 was officially inconclusive, as it did reconfirm Hart, a member of the Cherokee Nation, as a suspect, but did not narrow down the pool of possible suspects enough, showing that it applied to 1 in 7,700 Native Americans. DNA testing performed in 2017, taking advantage of the further 28 years of advances in testing, strongly suggests Hart's involvement in the crime, though the case remains officially unsolved. So again, this case is still unsolved. They haven't been able. There's a couple of things that you have to remember in this. Okay, this took place in 1977. Back in 1977, they were collecting evidence as best as they could, but they didn't know how testing would further itself into the millennial century. So they didn't know that. So the testing they did take from DNA and things like that from the girls' bodies, or what they found, a lot of it degraded because a lot of the testing methods they used before are different than what they use now. And there's different things. Like, I learned listening to a couple of podcasts that if the evidence is collected and put in plastic bags, sometimes it deteriorates over time. And that's why now a lot of crime scene investigators actually use paper bags, because it helps with not degrading any kind of samples that are used and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that I think back then they didn't know would benefit them in this century. You know what I mean? In 1989, DNA testing was conducted that showed 3 of the 5 probes matching Hart's DNA. Statistically, DNA from 1 in 7,700 Native Americans would obtain these results. So they're basically saying he's 1 out of 7,700 other people that this could be. In 2008, authorities conducted new DNA testing on stains found on a pillowcase. Those were semen stains, the results of which proved inconclusive because the samples were too deteriorated to obtain a DNA profile. In 2017, $30,000, equivalent to $38,500 in 2024, in donations were raised by the sheriff in order to do a new DNA test using the latest advances in testing. In 2022, authorities made public that DNA evidence strongly suggested Hart's involvement. Sheriff Mike Reed of Mays County said, "Unless something new comes up, something brought to light we are not aware of, I am convinced where I am sitting of Hart's guilt and involvement in this case." Reed said the results of the DNA test have been known since 2019, but did not go public with the findings until asked to do so by the victims' families. So they did know about this testing that was done, and the sheriff that is now Mike Reed, I'm assuming this was the person, I'm just making this assumption, so don't shoot me if it's not right. Mike Reed, I'm assuming, was the one that was in the documentary, and he fully believes that Gene Hart is the person that committed these crimes. And that's honestly what I believe too. In my opinion, I think that that he premeditated it. I think that he knew that this camp was a camp for Girl Scouts. I think that he listened in when the camp counselors were training, and he decided, he was like, hey, I'm gonna, this is what I'm gonna do. And that's when he made the decision. He left the note, and he came back when the girls came back. And unfortunately, he decided that he was going to target the tent that was farthest away from anybody to hear anything. Now, here's another really interesting thing. So the camp counselor that was in charge of these girls' tent, she was asleep that night. And so the night of the 12th, when the girls, they went to eat, and then they were sent back to their tents because it was raining. It was like pouring. It was a storm they weren't expecting. And so they said, girls, just go back to your tents, write some letters to home, and we'll commence all of the activities tomorrow. So during that evening, the girls were writing the letters, and I'm supposing they probably chatted a little bit and probably fell asleep into the later hours because, you know, they're little girls. And so during the night where everything was quiet, the camp counselor that actually found the bodies the next morning had woke up and said that she had heard a noise. She tried to wake up the other camp counselor that was sleeping with her, but unfortunately she was just like really in deep sleep and didn't wake up. But she basically heard this noise coming from the woods, and she couldn't describe what the noise was. She said it sounded like an animal, but it sounded kind of like foreign, like it was like Sasquatch or something. Like it was just a really weird noise, right? So she went out the tent, she flashed her flashlight, and she looked around. She couldn't find anything. She did find somebody else that had a flashlight during that time, but then assumed that they just walked back into whatever area they were in because she didn't see it anymore, and went back to bed. Now, this is important. Why is this important, Ashley? This is important because one of Hart's ex-girlfriends had came forward and stated that when Hart was intimate, if you know, you know, he would make this really weird sound, and what she described it as was the same sound that the camp counselor said she heard that night. Now, let me remind you, all three of these little girls were raped. There was also an argument in Hart's trial that he had that he had a vasectomy. So this is something I didn't know, and it doesn't happen to everyone, but this is something I didn't know. So when you have a vasectomy, you do not produce semen. Didn't know that. So that was his excuse. He was like, how can I produce semen, and how did you guys find samples of semen when I have a vasectomy and I don't produce semen? Well, let me also tell you this. So one, it's also been proven that some men still can produce semen. It's also proven that a lot of men that have vasectomies, their vasectomies kind of correct themselves, right? So come to find out, when Hart's body was actually, when they did like an autopsy on his body through the jails, they did find that Hart's vasectomy had corrected itself. So the nerves, or the actual things they do for a vasectomy, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know all of it, but what they do is they sever the nerve so you don't produce semen to get somebody pregnant. However, a lot of times, like I've heard this happens way more than a lot of people think, is what they sever off actually end up regrowing and connecting. This was the case in Hart. His had regrown, and they determined that at this time of the girl's murder, he could have produced semen that then was found. But again, they couldn't extract that enough, and it was so deteriorated later on down the line that he basically wasn't put in a group of 7,700 other people that it could have been. So with that being said, it was just a deteriorated sample. So that's a very interesting fact to this story, that even on a lot of these articles I've been over the past couple of days, they don't say that. There's just little things that are missing that I think people don't realize from this case. And that's one of the reasons why I do believe it was Gene Hart that killed Lori, Michelle, and Doris. I do not believe it was anybody other than him. They never really had any other suspects in this case. There was a lot of speculation, and I think the main defense for Hart at the time was basically like, I guess you can say his defense was that he was Native American and they were just singling him out, which honestly, I just don't think about it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I feel like he was just using that as a con to like get out. But at the same time, regardless of if they found him guilty or not, he was guilty in the first case he was in, and he was already going to be serving so much time. You know what I mean? Now, I just pulled up this, because I hadn't looked up the books, and I just pulled up about, it says, Someone Cry for the Children, the Unsolved Girl Scout Murders of Oklahoma, and the Case of Jean Leroy Hart. And supposedly, this is one of the books that the Crime Junkies actually was talking about, because their episode came out before the episode, or the 2022 documentary that had came out on Hulu and Disney Plus. So a lot of their perspective was really interesting. But this book that I'm looking at right now must be extremely rare, because for the hardcover it's $124 and for the paperback it's $99. Weird. There's also another one called The Unusual Suspect, the story of the defense of Jean Leroy Hart in the Girl Scout murder cases as told by the first time by one of the two defense attorneys. And I did hear about this book. I kind of want to read these. I might end up buying one of these books, because there's a few different books about these murders, and I think that it's very telling that the defense decided to write a book about it. I don't know. Maybe it's a little weird, maybe not. But yeah, I hadn't looked into books because I was just reading all of this for you guys and all of. But yeah, so this is the story of the Girl Scout murders and the tragic things that happened to these 3 Girl Scouts at Camp Scott in Mayors County, Oklahoma. This is just basic. It's affected that whole community. I think that it was a smaller area and a lot of people knew each other, and then when this happened, I think a lot of people started guarding themselves. Let me also tell you this is something that I wanted to leave for the end. So Doris Denise Milner, who was 10 years old, the one that I was telling you, she was having second thoughts. She did not want to be in camp anymore. She wanted to be at home with her family. When I told you guys, they told the girls, go in your tents and just write letters home. Doris Denise Milner did write a letter. And you know what she told her mom in that letter? She said she wanted to go home. So most likely her mother was going to be picking her up once she received that letter, because that's what she had told Denise she would do. Or Doris. They call her Doris. Her mom also calls her Denise. That's most likely what she was going to do. And the interviews with her mom are just heartbreaking, thinking that, you know, I can only imagine to think like you kind of forced, quote unquote, in my opinion, your daughter to go to camp and experience these awesome things only to get a horrendous call that she was raped and killed by somebody in the middle of the night. It's heartbreaking. And also Laura Lee Farmer's parents as well have spoken out a lot against this and about their daughter, and kind of kept this all alive as well. But all of these victims' parents, I just feel so bad for them. They thought they were sending their kids to a fun camp for them to keep busy and make new friends and explore more things and expand their horizons outside of just being with their family and at home, and something so tragic like this can happen. It's mind-boggling. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Again, I deep dived into this one. After I watched that documentary, I was like, give me more, you know what I mean? But I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'm sorry to give you guys 2 cases of 4 girls over this past week that were absolute lights, it seemed like, in their families, in their communities, in their homes, and just taken so callously by these people that have no regard for life, by these men, by these it's just it breaks my heart. You know what? Hart is probably where he belongs right now. Even though this is still unsolved, there is a lot of DNA testing that has still been sent out to try to get a definitive answer if Hart was the killer of these girls. And I hope that it comes out, because these families do deserve justice. They do deserve answers for that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you guys next week for our updates podcast on Thursday and another deep dive case on Friday. Till next time, guys, we'll definitely talk about it. Stay positive, stay awesome, and always be yourself. We'll talk about it next time. Bye, guys.